Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee here, and I am joined today by my good friends Beth Kanter. Hi, Beth.
Hi,
And
nice to be
also
here.
Allison Fine. Hey, Allison.
Hey, Charlene.
And they are the co-authors of a great brand new book called Smart Nonprofit. And I wanted to have them come on to the stream today because I think what they write in the book is so applicable to so many organizations and not just nonprofits. The things they talk about, smart technologies, how they can make organizations just function better, I think are smart learning. But also, nonprofits are part of our lives, not just the people who work at nonprofits, but we may be members, volunteers, board members, and they impact our lives and our communities, our churches, and our schools. So I thought this is a really good topic to bring up. So let's get into it. So, Beth, I will direct the first question to you. You talk about smart tech to help nonprofits be smart. What is smart tech, and how do you differentiate that from regular technologies? Some examples would be great.
Sure. So we actually came up with the term smart tech. It's an umbrella term that we use for advanced digital technologies that are making decisions for us instead of by us. Things like what to watch on TV, what to buy online, or automatically filling out forms or providing answers. And it includes like the technology itself are things that we're all familiar with, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all its various, as Allison likes to say, kissing cousins, chatbot, natural language processing, smart forms, computer vision, and so forth. But we wrote the book not to talk about the technology. And the reason why we came up, and we wanted to really talk to senior leaders in the nonprofit sector. And when we use terms like artificial intelligence and machine learning, they kind of step back and like, oh, I don't know how to code. That's not for me. And we really think this technology has some major implications for the way that nonprofits do their work.
Mm. And what you mentioned in the book, that one of the biggest benefits is that it's not just making work go away. It's not doing the work for you, but it's actually creating time.
Yeah.
And time is such an important thing. So can you just dig a little bit deeper? I thought there was a statistic, I just wrote it down here, that you could say people spend 30% of their time on admin. And that's
Right.
we all get back. I mean, you have time, you have choice. So when nonprofits actually put in a technology, what happens to them? How do they gain?
So,
Maybe Allison.
yeah. Thanks. So, Charlene, one of the key things we want to help people to understand is the technology that we're talking about that Beth just beautifully defined is not the technology that for the last 20 years or so has made work life frantically busy, right? It's contributed to the 24/7, always on, never ending, borderless workplaces that's created in part the Great Resignation, right? It is exhausting. People are burning out, and the work has very little meaning for them. This is particularly acute for nonprofit workers, right? You come to this work to make a difference in the world, and you find that your days are spent playing a game of whack-a-mole with email, right? So what this technology can do is it's great at doing rote tasks, right? Answering the same questions over and over again, filling out the same forms, checking invoices against budgets, the kind of work that you just mentioned that does take up that 30%. Our greatest hope is that the return on investment for smart tech is what we call the dividend of time. And that's time that people can then turn towards relationship building, creativity, solving difficult problems, building community, or even that 4-day work week. So we really think that this is an opportunity to get out of that last chapter of frantic busyness and pivot to a deeply relational style of work that will be much more meaningful for workers and much more successful for organizations.
And so when you think about how to do this, what are some examples of organizations that have successfully taken that? You talk about like matching invoices to expenses, but it seems like such a hard hill to climb. How did an organization begin and actually see some real benefit from this? And do you have to be a real techie to be able to do this?
I'll take that one, and I'll lead off with an example that sort of relates to the tagline of the book, staying human-centered in an automated world. And the organization is the Trevor Project. You may be familiar with them. They provide counseling to LGBTQ youth in crisis. And they had a problem. They had more demand for the counseling services than they had trained counselors, and these were volunteer counselors. So they turned to a bot, but a very kind of smart self-learning bot that could learn through interaction. But they didn't replace the counselors on the front line because this type of counseling requires, human empathy, special language skills, that just a machine can't do, even though we call it smart. So they spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, okay, so what is really the problem? Well, our problem is that we don't have enough trained counselors. Could we use this technology to help train the counselors? So they used this bot. Its name is Riley, and it was trained on data that were actual conversations between clients and counselors, stripped of all privacy information, and it's used as a training simulation tool, so that they can train more counselors without adding more staff or having the staff have to work nights and weekends because these are volunteers.
Mm. And so again, it gave them huge amounts of impact in a very short amount of time without a huge heavy lift on technology. This is technology they could just get off the shelf, training software basically. Or
yes and no. This organization actually was one of the winners of the Google AI Impact Challenge, and they actually got to work with some Google engineers who donated their time. So a lot of projects in our sector are partnerships with big tech companies that are providing time and resources, and they're bringing in the tech expertise. And the organization, of course, is the expert on the problem. So in this particular example, it was a partnership with Google.
Oh, interesting. But it required that the CEO, or I'm sorry, that the head of the nonprofit understand what that problem was and see that technology could be a solution for that. Interesting.
If I could add to that just a little bit, Charlene, it's such a beautiful example that Beth, outlined so beautifully. The key reason why we're having this conversation today, though, is because we're at this inflection point with smart tech, right? We've seen this before in technology. The last time Beth and I wrote a book together, The Network Nonprofit, we were talking about social media, where the computing power goes way up, the cost comes way down, right? We're at the heel of the hockey stick on adoption, and what feels like all of a sudden to everyday organizations, they can pull this kind of technology off the shelf, right? And they can implement a chatbot or automate their back office. And this is both great in terms of the adoption of the technology and also really frightening if you don't have C-suite engagement in what it means to have bots do what only people could do until a couple of years ago.
And we've actually heard, to build on what Allison was saying, we did a report for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, taking a look at all the fundraising tools that were out there and giving. And we were interviewing some CEOs of nonprofits, and we saw the wheels turning like, oh, you mean this could save 20 hours of my major gift prospect staff person's time? Oh, I could reduce headcount.
Yeah.
No, because the machines are not going to take the donor out to lunch and cultivate them, right? There's still a component of human interaction and human intelligence and human empathy that we need. It's not going to eliminate that by any means.
Yeah. So if people look at the smart tech and say, oh, it's a great way to be more efficient, to cut people out of the process, probably looking at it the wrong way. This is a way to supplement it. And that requires, again, I think your key recurring theme, that when you're looking at the smart technology, you have to be human-centered and really think about the role that humans have and how to accentuate that, bring that up, and use this tech to allow humans to be humans and do human work. I love this quote that you put in the introduction from Nicholas Carr. It comes from his book, The Glass Cage. Automation severs ends from means. It makes getting what we want easier, but it distances us from the work of knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Allison, can you talk a little bit about that? Because this seems to be one of the biggest dangers of automation. What Beth was talking about, it's so easy to just say, we're just going to save costs, we're going to save time, costs. But it also, this is another big danger, is that when you have automation, you don't know what clients are necessarily saying if they're just interacting with bots anymore. Talk a little bit more
That's
about
exactly right.
challenges. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So look, the first order of business is, so we call, let me back up half step. We call organizations that are using smart tech well, smart nonprofits, right? And they're human-centered, and they're prepared, and they're knowledgeable and reflective. The preparedness is really digging into what is this tech and what isn't this tech, right? Where should it be used? Where should we be very careful? Because the first order of business in using smart tech is to do no harm, right? If you are making it 10 times harder for somebody on the outside to get in and talk to a person on the inside, right? That's a really poor use of technology. And what makes smart tech so difficult in some ways, Charlene, is unlike social media, unlike technologies of the past, you can't always see it. It's invisible. It's built into other products. Beth likes to say it's like the refrigerator humming along in the background. But the biggest area of concern for social service agencies is that there is a likelihood that bias has been built in. We call it embedded bias, both by programmers who've used their own opinions in making the code. Kathy O'Neill is, data scientist famous for saying algorithms are opinions embedded in code. And because you need Library of Congress-sized data sets to train the tools in pattern matching and making conclusions, those historic data sets are almost by definition biased, often by race or by gender, right? So if you're an organization working to facilitate mortgages for low-income people, right? You've got the bias from the coder built in, and you've got the historic data sets that are automatically racist against brown and black people. And that's where the knowledgeable piece comes in. That's where we need the C-suite really deeply engaged in, is this a good use of the technology? How will we stay human-centered in using it? And when and how will we keep reflecting on its use to make sure that it's doing no harm?
Yeah. And so I'm sitting here thinking that if I am an advisor to a nonprofit, I'm a volunteer with a nonprofit, asking these kinds of questions would be super helpful to the head of the lead of the nonprofit. So I guess, Beth, give me an idea. What is it that they get wrong, these leaders? What do they get wrong when they're thinking about this new technology? How can they avoid, what are the biggest pitfalls and challenges that they face?
There's a couple of them. So I'll start with that. It's a tool. I'm going to send it down the hall to the IT department. I'm not technical, so I'm not going to be involved, and just like be sort of hands off. And we need to have all stakeholders involved, particularly leadership, as well as the end users or those who will be impacted by the use of this technology. And the reason we want leaders involved, and I'll go back to this dividend of time. It's not just thinking through the use case, right? There's the problem to be solved, but then it's how do we reinvest this dividend of time to make our workplace better, right? To make it less of a burnout bin, to attract more people because we have created this culture of well-being, because we have, the gift of time. We can actually take a breath. We can take breaks because we've created this efficiency, not to do more, not to work harder and do more faster, better, right? But to really have that space. So leaders need to be involved in that way, I think, and not think of it as just, it's a hammer, it's a screwdriver, let's just, do it. And to really, really think hard. That's the second thing about the problem that you want to solve. Your first idea might not be the right thing, and not to do it in sitting around a conference room or on a Teams call or a Zoom call with just your staff. You want to talk to the end users. You want to do a little bit of maybe ethnographic research, talking to the clients, talking to the donors, and see, how often do we ask, in nonprofits, the donors, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And that can inform the problem. And then there's another piece, and this relates to what Allison so beautifully laid out about responsible and ethical use. And it's really making sure that your values align, your organization's value match your technical partner or your technical tool. And often some tools are kind of black boxes. It's like this magic little fairy dust algorithm, and it's proprietary. So how does it work? And we want to encourage, leaders, organizations to really push back against that, and ask those hard questions. And I think the third place where they get it wrong is that they think they're going to get it right on the first try and go big, right? And we all have stories in the book where organizations got to this point where they had a proof of concept and they're testing it, and they said, well, this is just not the right use case. We're going to pivot. And with many times with nonprofits, we're so under pressure with lack of resources, or we have, amazing, horrible, wicked problems we have to solve, that we think of making mistakes and failing as a waste of time. So this is different. This technology really requires that approach.
Can I just dig down into a little bit better? What are some of the hard questions leaders should be asking? And Beth, I think we just follow up with that. And Allison, I want to follow up and see what other questions you would like to add too. Because you're saying it is, these are the questions you want to be asking your tech partner. Not many people are going to be blessed to have Google partners and engineers, but so you have this chatbot companies coming to you. What should you be asking them?
Asking them, tell us about the algorithm that runs this chatbot and how it was trained. What was the data set? But even before you start asking questions of the company, you should also don't trust everything they say on their website. Google them. An example, one small organization came and said to me, hey, I want to use this AI software that will automatically evaluate my website to make sure it's accessible to people with disabilities. Do you know about it? And I said, well, I think you should look at the reviews. I think you should look at the client list. You should talk to other people. But most importantly, you should Google the name of this product and the word ableist and see if anything comes up. And lo and behold, there was a lawsuit on the books because the algorithm wasn't actually correct in making accessible, fixes for the website.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Google comes to the rescue again. Allison, your thoughts about what are some good questions that people should be asking their tech partners?
So first, I want to help organizations back up one step. Charlene, we call smart tech, it's hot sauce, right? Not ketchup. It needs to be used sparingly and well. And we want organizations to think about what we call the exquisite pain point. Whatever the bottleneck is that is sucking up people's time or making it difficult for people to get in the organization, to really hone in on a very specific pain point where automation can be of huge benefit to the company. And then you want to have that values alignment with whoever your tech partner is. Too often we hear smaller organizations say, well, they just defer to a technologist or a software company. It's complicated. They say it's proprietary. I like to say to people, like, imagine walking into a bakery, Charlene, and the baker just, you ask for a chocolate cake, they hand you one, you say, hang on, I have an egg allergy. And they say, well, it's proprietary. The recipe's proprietary. We're not going to tell you what's in it, right? You have a right to ask. You can at least ask them what the assumptions were that they built the model on, and what kind of testing they did, what kind of data sets they used to test it, right? There are questions you absolutely should and have a right to ask and have answered. And the good news right now in the field of smart tech is that we're seeing an explosion in the number of companies, the number of tools out there. So you have options for who you want to work with for a chatbot or, automating the back office. The other thing that's just huge, and we did mention it a little while earlier, though, is to get out of the trap of efficiency, right? This is not about going faster. We talk a lot about what we call the leaky bucket problem in fundraising, right? If you have 10 donors in year one, fewer than a quarter of those donors are going to get to year two. Right, that's a dreadful number. I don't know if you've ever sat at a nonprofit board table. Beth and I have been on a lot of boards. we have never heard a conversation about donor retention rates, right? And the problem is not just that those donors are flying out of the bucket, but then the pressure is almost unbearable on fundraising teams to fill the bucket up again, right? And so you're racing as fast as you can. That's just a dreadful way of doing a job that should be deeply relational. And that's what we want leadership to be talking about. Where are the pain points and where and how can we get more relational?
Interesting. That's a great way to approach it. And the thing I'm taking away from this is that just because you're not a techie, not comfortable with this, doesn't mean that you don't have a right to be asking about it. You need to know just a little bit about the underlying technology. And I think that's what's great about the book. You lay it out in very clean, very, very simple ways for a nonprofit leader to understand, but also all the various constituents too who could help them and support them. I want to I just come back to this thing that about nonprofits, because you have experience with nonprofits and also for-profit organizations. What is the unique challenge to nonprofits when it comes to using smart tech? And it's helpful for people to know who are outside of nonprofits to, when they walk in, to say, this is the unique issue that nonprofits face. So you can't just assume that just like any other organization. So Allison, why don't you take that, and then Beth can follow up with it.
I think the biggest issue, Charlene, is the belief by so many nonprofits and their leaders that we can't automate because we'll have robots take over the jobs of people, and our missions are people driven. And we really want people to get out of that either or struggle with this. We are not talking about having robots take over people's jobs. We are talking about having smart tech do tasks, parts of jobs that are generally pretty dreadful for humans to do anyway, and then to have people do what they do best. So that dichotomy of values where we're facing nonprofits who feel like automation is antithetical, just deeply antithetical to their work, is the barrier that we are having to overcome.
Interesting. Beth, your thoughts on it?
Yes, I totally agree with what Allison beautifully just laid out, and especially when it comes to delivery of programs that kind of like, oh no, the robots are taking over. I think sometimes, depending on the department and the use case, sometimes I think in the fundraising area, it's thought of more as an efficiency tool to raise more money and to continue to be transactional and to treat donors like ATM machines. And it's this, can make the machine go faster. And fundraisers are some of the hardest, aside from those that are on the front line. The second group of people that work hours and hours and hours are fundraisers and more in danger of burning out. So I think it's like really shifting from that transactional to the relational in terms of fundraising, and also giving people that time that they need to think, to dream, to plan. I was just interviewing a fundraising team for a somewhat large organization. It's a large aquarium, 10, 15 people on the team. And I asked them, so how has this smart tech, has it helped you, take time off? Or she said, well, what's really been wonderful is it's helped us be more effective in getting the right ask to the right donor at the right time. So our numbers are great. And we feel like, wow, we can actually take a breath. We can actually step out of the office and go look at the dolphins in the aquarium. So we hope that leaders will not just look at this as an efficiency tool, but really look at it as a way to shift from transactional to relational.
Right. I have a question here from Ian. How do you overcome the barriers? Again, this is a little bit back where we were talking about the barriers that nonprofits have to actually see and understand how you can use these technologies. Again, you may have a leader who says, like, this isn't for me. Is this human based? I mean, people, you can see, you've heard these over and over again. So what are the ways to bring that nonprofit along, especially the leaders who just go, I'm skeptical. I just see all the bad sides and downsides of the technology and none of the upsides.
The step number one, Charlene, is to buy our book, put it on their desk, open it up, and help them read chapter 1. The second thing to do is to identify very small projects to give it a try. And so the project might be to try out a chat bot, right? To make one time-limited, scope-limited experiment. Not going to scare anybody, just to show them what it feels like to put this technology into practice.
Mm-hmm. And again, if there are some big pain points, you probably can alleviate a lot of that pain just right off the back. Like, oh, that's great. Now let's try another experiment, right?
That's a place to begin the conversation with non-tech people, right? You don't want to begin with, we're going to replace half of somebody's job with a robot. You want to begin with, where is it that we feel overwhelmed in this organization? If you've ever spent time in the back office of a social service agency, it is a culture of constant interruption, right? Answering the same questions over and over again. If a chatbot could take up 30% of those questions, the relief would be enormous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great example to give. I just want to shift into a little bit more about the book and how people can find it. I put up a link here of how people can find Smart Nonprofit. And I also do want to share, because Beth and Allison are incredible fonts of knowledge. They also have websites where you can find them. And Beth and I have known each other. We're just looking it up.
We won't say that, right?
We have known each other for a very long time. It's 15 years now? So yeah. 2007. So we have been, collaborating. And Allison, we've known each other too for quite a while with the publication of your first book, The Network Nonprofit. And we have seen that technology really change over time. Where do you think that the future of these techs will go? The technology, but also the relationship. And what potential could we have? So Beth, why don't we start with you and have Allison close out?
So I'll take the near term future, and Allison likes to go further ahead. So let's say that we have a nonprofit sector that becomes smart nonprofits with smart adoption of smart tech, and leaders really lean into this. And I could see where we have a field where people are actually happy, healthier, they're not burned out, they're resilient, and they're way more effective in serving the end clients, trying to address some of these wicked problems. And we're actually attracting people to our field because there's a huge sense of purpose and work-life balance. So, I mean, that's what I see. I hope it's true.
I'd like to see entire communities of nonprofits, Charlene, using the technology to get people the right services, stay with them, and build entirely healthier communities that way, to get out of our little silos of one organization, one problem, and to really, turn the telescope to the other end and focus on people out there, their problems, their opportunities, and to have a whole community response to support them.
That's a great big picture, because when you can get out of that busyness, out of the soul-sucking admin work that we have to all do, my goodness, just imagine how we can put that human energy into the purpose that we're trying to achieve. That's beautiful. Well, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just going to put up the banner again about where you can find more about the book. Smart Nonprofit. You can find it at your local bookstores. This is a link to a wonderful group called Bookstore on bookshop.org, and just a link to the local bookstores. So again, very purpose-driven group.
Thank you for having us, Charlene. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you for writing a beautiful book full of great examples and best practices. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Okay, thanks. All right, take care. Bye-bye.